Every city has its landmarks. Towers that scrape the clouds, bridges that span rivers, and neighborhoods filled with families who wake up believing the world outside is stable, safe, and predictable. Yet for millions of people across the globe, there is a chilling truth they rarely consider. Their home sits directly beneath an invisible bullseye. They live inside what military strategists coldly call a strike zone. To understand what that means, you must first understand the logic of modern warfare. Nations don't choose their targets randomly. They identify infrastructure that sustains life and power. Energy grids, transportation hubs, command centers, ports, and military bases. Cities that host these critical systems are not just population centers, they are pressure points. Strike them, and an entire region can collapse. Look at a modern map of nuclear or strategic strike planning, and patterns emerge. Capitals are always at the top of the list. Washington, Moscow, Beijing, London. Paris, because political decapitation is the fastest way to paralyze a nation. But beyond these capitals are the less obvious targets. Industrial hubs, satellite control stations, data centers, and logistical choke points. If you live in or near one of these places, you are already inside the kill zone of any future global conflict. The unsettling reality is that many who occupy these regions never realize it. They go about their lives under the illusion of security, never questioning why there are military installations nearby, why certain power stations are so heavily guarded, or why their city appears in defense think tank studies about strategic vulnerabilities. Yet these are the telltale signs. In the event of a global conflict, whether nuclear, cyber, or conventional, the first wave of attacks would not be random chaos. It would be precise, calculated, and devastatingly effective. Entire cities could be erased in minutes, not because of who lives there, but because of what operates there. The people are incidental. The infrastructure is the prize. This is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of modern deterrence. Millions live in strike zones right now, unaware that they are woven into war plans drawn up in bunkers thousands of miles away. And if the unthinkable happens, location alone could decide whether they survive the opening salvo or vanish in the first flash of fire.
No target list begins with people. Militaries don't draw maps based on where families live or where children go to school. They begin with infrastructure, the systems that keep a country alive. When planners sit inside their command centers, the maps they see are stripped of faces and emotions. Instead, they are covered in grids of pipelines, power lines, airports, factories, and communication nodes. In that cold calculus, cities are transformed into pressure points. The first priority is always command and control. A nation that cannot communicate cannot fight. Capitals, with their ministries of defense, presidential palaces, and military headquarters, are almost always at the top of the strike list. A single missile that disables a government's ability to issue orders can be more effective than destroying 10 divisions on the battlefield. Next come energy systems. Power plants, oil refineries, nuclear stations, and gas terminals are seen as lifelines of modern society. Strike them, and not only do the lights go out, hospitals shut down, factories freeze, and transportation halts. This makes energy hubs magnets for targeting. Then there are transport choke points. Ports like Rotterdam, Shanghai, or Los Angeles are arteries of global trade. Rail junctions, interstate highways, and airports serve as the veins of national supply chains. If war erupts, these places would likely be hit within the first hours to cut off a nation's ability to resupply itself or move troops. Industrial capacity is another factor. Factories that produce weapons, semiconductors, or advanced electronics are worth more than entire neighborhoods in the eyes of military planners. Destroying them delays or cripples the enemy's ability to sustain war. And finally, there are the hidden nodes, data centers, satellite uplink facilities, and underground fiber hubs. In the digital era, control over information is as important as control over oil. Taking out these nodes can cripple communication networks across entire continents. It is a ruthless logic. Entire cities and millions of lives can be reduced to nothing more than strategic assets on a map. And if you live near one of these vital systems, even if you've never thought of it that way, then your home is already inside a strike zone. If capitals are the brain of a nation, then industrial hubs and military cities are its muscle. They may not carry the same symbolic weight as government centers, but in the cold logic of war planning they are just as valuable and just as vulnerable. Consider the cities built around heavy industry. Detroit in the United States, once the arsenal of democracy, still hosts defense manufacturers and automotive plants with dual-use capabilities. In Europe, cities like Hamburg and Munich are home to critical engineering and aerospace firms. In East Asia, industrial zones in South Korea and Japan produce semiconductors, ships, and advanced electronics. In wartime, these cities transform from bustling economic engines into bullseyes, because striking them means crippling a nation's ability to fight. Military cities are even more obvious. Norfolk, Virginia, home to the largest naval base in the world, is not just a city. It is a strategic juggernaut. A single successful strike there would disable the backbone of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. Similarly, Murmansk in Russia anchors the Northern Fleet, guarding the Arctic approaches and nuclear submarine routes. In China, cities like Qingdao and Dalian serve as launch points for naval operations in the Pacific. These are not just homes for sailors and soldiers, they are pillars of global military power. Airbase cities are also prime targets. Places like Ramstein in Germany or Okinawa in Japan may look like quiet towns on the surface, but they host sprawling runways and hardened aircraft shelters that connect continents. In a war scenario, adversaries know that grounding aircraft early can tip the balance of the skies. Then there are dual-purpose industrial military hubs. Cities like Shenzhen or Seattle don't just produce consumer goods. They churn out technology with direct military applications. To war planners, the distinction between civilian and military blurs. If a city builds the chips, engines, or systems that keep weapons functioning, it becomes a target. The residents of these places often carry on daily life unaware. Children play in neighborhoods shadowed by airbases. Workers drive past shipyards that launch nuclear submarines. Tourists stroll through cities that double as arsenals. Yet, in the silent maps of strike planners, these locations are circled in red. And in any opening volley of global war, they would burn second right after the capitals. If governments and industry are the brain and muscle of a nation, ports and choke points are its arteries. They carry the lifeblood of modern civilization. Food, fuel, raw materials, and manufactured goods. To cripple these arteries is to suffocate entire economies. That is why, in the silent playbooks of military planners, ports and trade choke points are circled as some of the most valuable targets. Consider the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach together. They handle nearly 40% of U.S. imports. Striking this single hub would send shockwaves through American supply chains, collapsing retail shelves, disrupting fuel imports, and stalling manufacturing nationwide. Across the Atlantic, Rotterdam in the Netherlands is Europe's largest port, a gateway for oil, chemicals, and container goods. If Rotterdam went dark, Europe's economic engine would sputter within days. But the risk is not confined to ports alone. Maritime choke points, narrow waterways that funnel global trade, are some of the most vulnerable locations on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz carries a fifth of the world's oil. The Suez Canal links Europe to Asia. The Malacca Strait near Singapore channels nearly a quarter of global maritime trade. In wartime, these narrow corridors would be prime targets, not just for missiles but for blockades, mines, and cyber interference with shipping systems. Air cargo hubs are equally vital. Airports like Hong Kong, Memphis, and Dubai are lifelines of global logistics. Disabling them would cripple high-value trade and just-in-time supply chains that modern economies depend on. For residents living near these lifelines, the danger is invisible but immense. The cranes, tankers, and shipping containers that tower over skylines look like symbols of prosperity. But to a missile operator halfway across the world, they are pressure points that could collapse economies with a single strike. In global war scenarios, ports and choke points are never left off the map. They are among the first targets. Because when the arteries of trade are cut, the body of a nation weakens long before the bombs stop falling. In the past, war was fought with tanks and bombers, and the targets were factories, ports, and fuel depots. But in today's digital age, some of the most critical strike zones are nearly invisible. They don't look like military assets or sprawling cities. They look like quiet buildings filled with servers, or clusters of satellites orbiting silently above our heads. Yet these hidden nodes are among the most valuable targets in modern conflict. Take data centers. To most people, they are anonymous warehouses tucked into suburbs or industrial parks. Few realize that inside, thousands of servers hum day and night, hosting everything from banking systems to government communications to cloud storage that powers the global economy. Striking a handful of these facilities could cripple internet access, financial transactions, and even emergency response systems across entire regions. If you live near a major data hub in places like Ashburn, Virginia, or Dublin, Ireland, you are unknowingly living next to a bullseye. Then there are satellites, the invisible backbone of modern warfare. They provide GPS navigation, weather forecasting, communications, and missile guidance. NATO, Russia, China, and the United States all know that in a real conflict, taking out satellites would blind militaries and disrupt civilian life simultaneously. Anti-satellite weapons already tested in orbit make it clear, space is a strike zone, and if you live in a city that controls or launches satellites, you are on the map. Finally, there are the cyber hubs. These are not military bases or ports, but fiber optic landing stations and internet exchange points where global data cables converge. They look harmless, small compounds on coastlines or inconspicuous office towers in major cities. Yet, destroy or disable them, and you cut entire nations off from the digital world. For cities like Marseille, Singapore, or New York, these hidden hubs make them prime targets in any cyber or kinetic strike scenario. The unsettling reality is that the most modern strike zones are the least visible. They don't roar with engines or shine with skyscrapers. They hum quietly, invisible to the public, until the day they are silenced, and entire societies suddenly realize how fragile their digital lifelines truly are. For those who unknowingly live in strike zones, daily life feels ordinary. Children walk to school. Workers commute past shipyards, airbases, and skyscrapers that double as command centers. Families enjoy weekends in cities filled with the very infrastructure that military planners mark in red ink. The irony is cruel. The places that thrive in peacetime are often the very places destined to burn in war. Residents of Washington, Moscow, or Beijing might sense the symbolism of their cities. But what about the people in Norfolk, Virginia, where the largest naval base in the world sits just miles from suburban neighborhoods? Or the families in Rotterdam, whose homes sit in the shadow of Europe's busiest port? In these places, the bullseye is invisible, but it is there all the same. This invisible reality shapes lives in subtle ways. Housing near strategic infrastructure is often cheaper, not because buyers know it's a strike zone, but because of the constant noise of jets, ships, or industrial activity. Schools near bases practice evacuation drills. Cities with critical energy hubs quietly issue radiation response guides, yet rarely is the connection made explicit. These are preparations for the possibility of war. And then there is the psychological distance. People know, in the back of their minds, that living near military bases or ports carries risks. They see the barbed wire, the radars turning in the night, the endless convoys of trucks and planes. But the mind protects itself by normalizing the abnormal. The jets overhead become background noise, the armed patrols fade into routine, until the day they don't. Living in the crosshairs means carrying on as though nothing is wrong, even when reality says otherwise. It means going to work, raising families, and building lives atop targets carefully plotted in foreign bunkers. Most will never know their address is listed in a war plan, but if the worst comes, they will discover it in the flash of a second. Proof that they were always living inside a strike zone.
The unsettling truth is this: in the age of modern warfare, almost nowhere is truly safe. If you live near a capital, a port, a base, or even a quiet building filled with servers, you are already in someone's crosshairs. The world has become a network of strike zones, mapped in advance, rehearsed in simulations, and ready to ignite if diplomacy fails. For decades, deterrence has kept these plans locked away. The knowledge that one strike would trigger another, that a single city erased could cascade into global annihilation, has so far kept the missiles silent. But deterrence is not a guarantee. It is a gamble. And the people who live inside these invisible bullseyes are the chips on the table. Survival in this world is no longer just about stockpiles of food or bunkers of concrete. It is about awareness. Knowing that the skyscraper downtown is also a command hub. Knowing that the port where container ships line the horizon is a lifeline, and therefore a target. Knowing that the silent hum of servers nearby carries not just your emails, but the weight of an entire economy. Awareness does not erase the danger, but it sharpens the choices that might matter if the unthinkable comes. For those in strike zones, preparation can be as simple as identifying shelter, as complex as building resilience into communities, or as sobering as accepting the fragility of modern life. Because in the end, strike zones are not about borders or flags, they are about the infrastructure that defines survival in the 21st century. The final reality is this: the next war, if it comes, will not ask who you are. It will not care about your name, your history, or your beliefs. It will care only about where you live. And if that place carries strategic value, then your life, your city, your future may already be written into a strike plan drawn up in a room you will never see. That is the truth we rarely speak aloud. If you live here, you're already in a strike zone,